Alright, everyone. Hello, it's Teddy, and today I wanted to talk about something that is kind of relevant just due to bigger content creators talking about it around this time, and that is the ban list. So, Wizards of the Coast, when they were doing all of their stuff talking about, like where they're going in the future and the bracket system, they also talked about uh what's it called? They talked about maybe in the future removing cards from the ban list, which I thought was really interesting. And let's just say their name, the Command Zone, did a podcast talking about this. So I wanted to give not my reaction to their podcast, but rather just my reaction to the ban list and what I'd like to see go. Now, I'd like to say first and foremost that I'd like to get this straight. It is always easier to take a card out of the game, or sorry, to put a card back into the game than take a card out of the game. And I'm sure you understand this, and the reaction is always going to be super strong when you try and take a card out of the game. Like, for example, what happened with the recent bannings. There was a inglorious uproar about how this was unfair, all of the money being lost. Now the format's dead. They killed formats. They killed Commander. And realistically, the format's fine. People are still playing, and it's all gonna be okay. But I just wanted to say this at the start, and this is a sentiment that I actually had earlier, which makes me a little happy, when I was talking and reacting to Wubby's video, reacting to the original Commander bans. I shared the same sentiment of it's easier to bring a card back into the game than take one out, and I find that to be true still. And that's kind of where we're going to be going. So I want you to keep that in mind. And when you are thinking about cards that I know we've talked about, you know what, we'll get more into it. But let's just get started. So, first things at the top are this is the banned list. This is actually on the official Commander site. Or, what was their official site, because this was the Commander RC site prior to what's it called? It was prior to when, all the stuff happened. So this is all the cards on their list, and I guess all the cards banned so far. So let's go over the first top little bit here. All cards that refer to the anti-mechanic. All cards that Wizards has removed from constricted formats. All cards with the conspiracy card type. Full list here. So let's go over, the anti-mechanic first. So I looked at this, and I do not know what anti was about. But I believe, if I remember, anti was when, back in the early days of Magic, apparently Commander used to be played with stakes. It was a trading card game, and I don't remember exactly how it worked, but I believe at the time, anti meant that you were playing for, it meant you would give one of your cards if you lost the game that, maybe your opponent chooses or you choose. I forget how it works, but the ante was the card you were giving to your opponent, is my understanding. That could be wrong, and I don't really know. So, this is the text here. Let's look at the Bronze Tablet. Remove Bronze Tablet from your deck before playing if you're not playing for ante. If you're not playing for ante. Remove Contract from below from your deck if you're not... Oh, this is... Okay, that's not the effect. That's just like... It doesn't do anything. Discard your hand, ante the top card of your library, then draw 7 cards. You own target card in the ante. Exchange that card with the top card of your library. Each player antes the top card of their library. So, yeah, these are the cards that you would lose, presumably, I believe. Jeweled Bird. Anti-Jeweled Bird. If you do, put all other cards you own from the ante into your graveyard, then draw a card. Yeah, interesting. Each player may ante the top card of their library. If a player does, that player's life total becomes 20. Okay. Yeah, these are kind of cool cards, but again, Commander is not about playing for money, or, in this case, for cards. I think the Commander format would have died very quickly if Ante was still around, but Ante isn't even how you play normal Magic now. It's kind of very outdated. And as we saw, removed from constructed formats is depictions of racism. And just based on the names, you can almost guarantee that these were, a bit yucky. And it's probably better that these cards, at least, we could do something with them. I think they still, all of them, pull pretty high prices, and because they're like artifacts now, Wizards is not printing them anymore for sure. That's definitely the case, but just based on names alone, you can kind of, it's not good. Not good. So, final one that is extra is Conspiracy, which was it looks like you would start them. Oh, some of them start face up. I think mostly they started face down in the command zone, but it looks like they were just a dedicated, this was made for Commander, a little add-on that was supposed to make the game more fun, kind of like, I don't know, Eminence, another Commander-only mechanic, because all of these cards say start this card in the command zone, and yeah, they just ended up being completely unbalanced, making the game a lot less fun, or just, they're yucky. Like, for example, WorldNet seems great, as long as every card in your card pool started the game in your library, or in the command zone, lands you control add 1 mana of any color if you tap. That doesn't sound powerful, but if you're running a 5-color, heck 4-color, 3-color deck, I'd love to have that. I'd love to try playing with it right now, but I don't know if this replaces your Commander. I don't know how, these work. Are they an addition to your Commander? But this seems great, personally. I'd love to try playing with one of these, or some of these. They have some fun effects, but I completely understand why these are banned. This is another example, in my opinion, of this one is crazy. Your minimum deck size is reduced by 5. At first, I thought that said is reduced to 5, but this just means you can have 95 cards in your deck, which is still kind of cool, because a lot of people run, fetch lands, like Fabled Passage, or, lands that don't really do anything besides for get another land, just to thin their deck. And this would just allow you to have a more consistent Commander deck. I think it's cool, in theory. But then again, it's also, I'm sure there was meta ones and the ones you don't run, but that's the cards that are banned, and I'm sorry, it's in white. I don't know how to change it, but yeah, that's, it's a lot. That is where we're starting. So now, I wanted to go through all of the cards on the current banned list and just talk about each one, and as a casual player, see which ones I might want to have added back. I'm going to kind of breeze over the most recent bans because I made 3 videos talking about my opinions on cards that were recently banned, which was the Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, Dockside Extortionist, and Nadu. But we'll still talk about them. Moral of the story, I don't really mind that they're banned. Nobody liked Nadu. All the other 3 were controversial, but are frankly a little better for the format. And let's get into it. I guess I'll say one more thing. Me personally, I think Dockside was the smallest problem out of these. Of course, it made itself a big deal in the games that it mattered, but for me, I think Dockside did a very good job at regulating itself. But now let's get into the game. So we're starting with Ancestral Recall. Alright, draw 3 cards or force your opponent to draw 3 cards. And that is 1 mana, draw 3 cards. Okay, I gotta look up something real quick. MTG. Let's see if I looked up the right card. Yeah, so Harmonize here is draw 3 cards, and it costs 4. So, just like, isn't that crazy? You get to draw 3 cards for what is only 1 blue mana. Blue showing its superiority. And this is, if I remember correctly, part of the Power 9. So they actually specified in their thing, their little description here, that the reason they banned it is not because of how strong it was, but because it was really expensive, and they just wanted people to not feel like they need Ancestral Recall to play Commander. And honestly, I think it's a great decision. I know people say price shouldn't matter in Commander, but I think it's really important to keep in mind, as a casual player, I like playing with real cards. I know that's going to sound crazy. I think we all like playing with real cards, and funnily enough, it's actually the more hardcore people who are more willing to not play with, to play with fake cards or proxies, which they functionally do the same thing, but yeah, casuals generally stick to real cards. So it's nice that I don't have to worry about, like, man, now none of my blue decks are ever going to be optimal because Ancestral Recall costs $8,000 or whatever it costs. Probably, it might even be more than that. I don't know. The Power 9 is crazy. So, let's get into the next card. Balance. Okay. Each player chooses a number of lands he or she controls equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Players discard cards and sacrifice creatures the same way. This honestly doesn't seem that bad. It's really cheap, but it doesn't seem that bad. Oh, wait, let's look at it. Let's look at what they said. On its face, Balance looks like a very effective catch-up strategy that's mechanically very white. It leads to slow, long games, low density of meaningful decisions, or memorable events. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I get that. Like, personally, this card seems nice because it is the most effective catch-up, but they're right. It slows down the game. I can think of other cards that do something very similar and are even more brutal, you could argue, like Cyclonic Rift, but hey, whatever. Biorhythm. Let's look at that. Each player's life total becomes the number of creatures he or she controls. I hate this card. I understand why people find it balanced, but I just hate the idea that the only counter to something like this is to counterspell it. Like, and I know that's pretty much every sorcery. Like, technically, balance could be balanced too, because you'll have 2 blue presumably if they're using balance, or you'll have at least 2 blue mana. So you could theoretically counter it, and Biorhythm costs 8. But I just hate, like, what if this effect goes off? What if nobody's playing blue? Then suddenly the game's pretty much over. It's very similar to Worldfire, which I don't believe is banned. No. Yeah. Worldfire just, it just changes the format of the game. And it's okay if you want to, like, say we're going to play a Biorhythm game and just make Biorhythm go off on turn 8 automatically. But that seems like a weird, yucky format thing that I don't want to touch. I wouldn't unban this. I don't like it. It's almost too easy. And of course you can say counterspell, but you can say that to literally, well, not every card in the game, but almost every card in the game. So, yeah. Black Lotus. Again, Power 9, I think, is why they banned it, but also incredibly powerful. I don't know. Let me see what they said. Did they say it was just powerful? Okay. Wow, it wasn't banned for power level. It could very easily... Well, they said it was originally not banned for power level. It probably should have been banned for power level. 3 mana of any color, well, single color of your choice, is kind of insane. And I think Jewel Lotus proved that fact very well. Being able to play 3 mana, especially to cast anything. I think Rhystic Study's 4 mana, if I remember correctly, but you can't cast Rhystic Study. You can cast an Elemental Bond. You can cast... I'm trying to think of other good... A Douthie Voidwalker. You could cast Dockside, I think, right? Yeah, you could cast Dockside. Moral of the story, there are plenty of good 3-drops that you could cast solely with Black Lotus, and if you play it turn 1, you have 4 mana to play with, and could even cast a 4-cost commander if you're only running dual colors and have the other color in hand. It's just yucky. Black Lotus is strong, but it's also incredibly expensive. So, let's look at the next card. Braids, Cabal Minion. Okay. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact, creature, or land. This card just seems very unfun. And I would say that there are some cards that exist nowadays that... This card is even more oppressive than Turgid. I guess Braid's leaving just made Turgid the most toxic, or most salty commander by... What's it called? By, like, having her removed. She lost first place by being disqualified, by being banned, and then Turgid got it. But yeah, they have a very similar kind of annoying leech your resources playstyle, and I hate it. I do not like that card, and I hope Braids doesn't come back, because that seems miserable. Of course, and by the way, I'd like to get this out of the way. I think Braids does kind of scale with power level, because at higher powers, you're getting more cards out, you're getting rituals out, you're getting stuff faster. So the problem is when you bring Braids to a low power table, if you bring Braids to my table, you're just going to instantly win, because everyone's going to be going resource negative, because they're only playing 1 card a turn for the early turns, and they're just going to sacrifice everything they play. It's really unfortunate. I guess it's nice that you don't sacrifice enchantments with Braids, but man, what a brutal card. Yeah, it doesn't leave much room for fun. Channel. Until end of turn, anytime you could activate a mana ability, you may pay 1 life. If you do, add white to your mana pool. This seems like the... what's it called? This seems like the first, like, super fast mana removal. You could activate a mana ability you may pay. Yeah, I guess that counts for lands, right? Because they are mana abilities. That's interesting. Yeah, that's super strong. And I get that it's only for 1 turn, but if you're trying to cut back on fast mana, I guess Channel's just where they decided to start. Players always have something to do with the mana. Channel often catapults. Yeah, I mean, it adds up. This is not a surprise. Chaos Orb is super funny. This is one of my favorite banned cards, just because it was like a disability thing that they said, pretty much. It just changes the play of the game. It's partially, sorry. So Chaos Orb has a lot going on with it. It was banned because not only does it require dexterity, you know, if you're good at throwing cards. I don't have a card on me. They're over there, but yeah, if you're good at throwing cards, then Chaos Orb rewards it. You can hit a bunch of cards at once, but it also kind of alters the way that an entire game would be played, because you want to spread out your cards super far so that no 2 cards can get hit and Chaos Orb lands between them. Oh man, what a goofy card. I love that card. I would make a full deck of Chaos Orbs if you could, but that is just so funny. And you know, either way, Chaos Orb is destroyed at the end. But yeah, that one, honestly, I get that it's annoying, because it just makes everything take more space. But yeah, I completely get Chaos Orb. That one I would unban, but I would just reprint Chaos Orb as a silver border. That's my point. Silver border Chaos Orb, which I think they actually have one of those in the Unfinity, you know, the unsets. They have one that is that. Coalition Victory. You win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. Now, this isn't that hard to accomplish, because I believe it doesn't specify it has to be a unique creature, or that it has to be a creature. Like, you don't need a black creature, a blue creature, a green creature. You can just summon an Ur-Dragon, for example. You've got all your creature types covered, and frankly, with how the game has kind of evolved, it's not that hard to accomplish this. you can usually, with some decks, you can even get all 5 land types turn 2. It's kind of crazy. But moral of the story, I don't like Coalition Victory. It just seems like... but this is just a problem that I have with Commander as a whole. I don't like Approach of the Second Sun. I don't like Simic Ascendancy. I don't like alternate win cons. I think they can be cool, but in large part, it just feels like... It's just like, especially in the case of this spell, because it's cast as a sorcery, it's just instant doom. And it's like, okay, no one plays blue at the table. Okay, guess you're done. It's yucky. I don't like the idea that a sorcery, while there are sorceries, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of sorceries in the game right now that can win you the game outright. I think this is a card that, again, as I've said, easier to add cards back into the game than take them out with Rule 0. Because, if I tell someone, hey, we don't play Ur-Dragon at our local game store, I mean, you've seen, if you haven't seen Reddit or YouTube comments, people go berserk if you tell them there are extra cards on the ban list that you added as a store owner, or that you have in your pod. People get so mad. So, Coalition Victory, while I think some tables would be completely okay with it, and frankly excited that it's coming back, just add it back in with Rule 0. If you really want to see it, I think there are people who'd be okay with it, but me, I'm just happy that... I hate 5-color in general, because it just feels like the obvious conclusion to do with a deck like that is just to build all the good stuff together, because you have all the colors. Why not just run all the best cards from every color? There's no downside. I hate it. Of course, land drops are the big downside, actually getting all of your colors, but you can overcome that with other cards. Now, Dockside, already talked about. Not great. This is, again, my personal opinion. I wouldn't mind seeing Dockside return. I don't think Dockside was that big of a problem, and maybe this is just because I play at a low power table, but I understand why they banned it. They said that at high power tables, it has a super strong ETB effect, and they just wanted more variety, basically. And I think they're going to get a lot more variety now that Dockside's out of the game. And it does have a very boring loop where it encourages you to play your Dockside, blink your Dockside, and there's going to be actually quite a few characters on this list that have that same sort of problem where the game just becomes time to pop this incredibly powerful ETB by blinking back and forth, over and over again. But yeah, Emrakul is the next. Aeon's Torn, 15 mana. This spell can't be countered. When you cast this spell, take an extra turn. Flying protections from spells that are 1 or more colors, so protection from everything, pretty much. Annihilator 6. Put into a graveyard from anywhere. Its owner shuffles their graveyard into the library. So I heard people say that it's impossible to cheat out Emrakul, but I don't think that's true. I think Emrakul can be, what's it called? Cheated out. But I think people in the comments section know a lot better than me, so I'm not going to say that for sure. However, I think Emrakul is annoying because it's just a 15/15 presence on the table that almost no deck is going to have the proper tools to deal with. Like, what are you going to do? Cast a Toxic Deluge at 15 plus power? Maybe if you're in a game this, like, where Emrakul naturally comes out, then maybe that is a feasible solution, but it's got protection from spells that are 1 or more colors, and actually, it's not indestructible, I guess. But, that protection from spells that are 1 or more colors is rough. So I guess you could. I'm not sure how that works. Do board wipes affect Emrakul? Like, if you cast a Farewell, does that work? I don't know. That's a question for you in the audience. I get Emrakul. Yeah, Emrakul was banned due to overwhelming outcry from the community. I'll trust the community on this one. Ramping quickly into it was one of the most common and least interesting ways to win. Amazing colorless finisher. Okay, yeah, so it's just one of the strongest Eldrazi. Fair enough. Eldrazi, honestly, I find Annihilator yucky, so, I'm not gonna say I'm sad to see it banned. Arroyo, oh, what is this? Okay, whenever the 4th spell of a turn is played, flip Arroyo Soratami Ascendant. And what's the other side? Counter the first spell player. Counter the first spell played by each player or opponent each turn. Okay, that's really annoying. Aereo led to decks that cast and flipper early, where targeted removal is often ineffective. Does not always. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, one-sided and oppressive. Fair enough. I'm not going to disagree. I would hate to play against this because, this is a funny card that I can see a lot of more veteran players really enjoying because they see the downside. They have to cast 4 spells in a turn, and then they get their buffed Aereo or whatever. But I think this is one of those things where the less casual players don't realize that cards like this scare players from their community and scare players from learning to ever use removal, because this card basically discourages you from using removal because it's like, oh, well, it's going to be countered anyways. I mean, it's, oh man, what an annoying card. I hate that card. I hate it, and I've only just looked at it this once for the first time, so yuck. Keep that on there. Falling Star. Flip Star onto the plane air. Oh my goodness. Another one of these. 360 degrees. Falling Star does 3. Okay. This is annoying. This is the same thing as Chaos Orb. It's kind of funny, and I give it credit for being funny. But, yeah, no. No, that's staying on the ban list. That's such a stupid card. That one, Falling Star and Chaos Orb, I'd like to say I'd be okay with taking off the ban list. Fast Bond. You may put as many lands into play as you want each turn. Fast Bond does, it's each turn, and it stays out. Fast Bond does 1 damage to you for every land beyond the first that you play in a single turn. This feels like a card that was printed obviously. It was printed without Commander in mind, and, yeah, what do I have to say? This is the fastest ramp in the game. If you have cards in your hand, if you're playing Simic, this card would go so hard, though. I'd love to try it at least once in Simic. But, yeah, it gets you super far ahead, and, play it in a Simic landfall deck, or any landfall deck. Man, yeah, that is a crazy card, Flash. So, I heard Flash was banned almost entirely due to CDH, but I don't believe that is why they banned it. I think they just banned it because it's so powerful. So, Flash, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay its mana cost, reduced by up to 2. So, if I remember correctly, the play pattern was you would play an island, you'd play a Mana Crypt or something akin to Mana Crypt, something that gets you at least 1 white or 1 colorless mana. You tap both of those. You play Flash. You play Protean Hulk. When Protean Hulk dies, you search for 6 mana's worth of creatures, and you can, and also, Flash is instant, so it doesn't even have to be your turn. And since it says if you do, sacrifice it unless you play the mana cost reduced by up to 2. And then you could search for Thoracle, a card that mills your library that I believe costed 1. That would just let you mill as many cards as you wanted from your library. And you would play, it was like an L-Tor Knight or something. And that combo could win you the game from turn 1 on anyone's upkeep, which is kind of ridiculous. Of course, you'd have to get to your turn to play your Mana Crypt, but theoretically, once you pass your turn 1, you could just win on anyone's turn. It had a crazy amount of flexibility, and frankly, it's not that hard to just put a bunch of creatures with powerful leave the battlefield. I think Protean Hulk's not even banned. No, Protean Hulk's still just super strong. And I think kind of expensive, so that's probably why people don't touch it as much. But maybe it's just too try hard. Gifts ungiven. Search your library for up to 4 cards with different names and reveal them. Target opponent chooses 2 of those cards. Put those chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand. Huh. Okay. Interesting. So you choose 4 cards, reveal them, target opponent chooses 2 of them, and the ones they chose go to your graveyard and you get the alternative. Yeah, this does just seem like a combo fetch, and you can probably set it up in such a way that you always get at least one of the cards you wanted. It doesn't seem that... Because you're searching your entire library. You're tutoring for 4 cards. This is insanely ridiculous. I completely understand why that's banned. Golos, so I've stated before, I have a big problem with 5-color commanders. I just don't like it because I believe that every card is good at something, or every color is good at something. And red, I know red has its problems in Commander. It is probably, I think, what most people would consider, no matter what level they play, the weakest color type. But not in Magic as a whole, because it always super performs in Standard. It has its spot as the aggro king. But in Commander, it's a little harder to do aggro stuff. But moral of the story is, I hate that people can have access to all 5 colors, and it makes me super happy that Golos, who you only play for colorless mana, is out of the game, because he was the Kane of my deck has no theme besides for having access to all 5 colors. And now Kenrith has taken his spot, and I'd love to see Kenrith go on the list. They just keep shooting down 5-color commanders until there's none left. But, that's just my opinion. I'm jaded towards 5-color. They're also expensive, which, means I'm never going to play one of these. But, that's just where it's at. There are many problems with the card, but the greatest is that in the low to middle power level tier, Golos is simply a better choice of leader for all but the most common commander-centric decks. All but the most commander-centric decks. I actually heard that Golos was so good that you would run him in, blue decks. If you had a mono blue deck, Golos was a better commander if you weren't, going for Urza High Lord Artificer. Golos was just better at being a blue commander. He was better at being a Dimir commander, better at a Golgari, a Gruul, Selesnya commander, than any of these other, the actual commanders of that color. So they just wouldn't have access to his ability, but just because he can search for, he can ramp, he's a pretty good choice. It's kind of infuriating, and I'm super glad to see him on the ban list. Are there stronger commanders that you could be looking at now, for the most part, in every category? Yes, but I just hate 5-colored commanders, and he is just the perfect I have no theme for my deck. I'm gonna play Golos, which is why I'd like to see him stay banned. Grizzlebrand. Flying lifelink, pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. So black is kind of the king of cheating out creatures, and I could see you throwing him in your graveyard, reanimating him for 3 or whatever, and suddenly you're starting to, you pay 7 life and you do that, 5 times, 35? Yeah, you just draw 35 cards of your deck, and you win the game, because how are you going to lose with 35 cards in hand? Grizzlebrand is ridiculous, and I think he could stay banned. Hullbreacher. Flash. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. So not only do you deny them their draw, you get a treasure token out of it. Yeah, this is just a yucky card. This I would say is even worse than Dockside. But, oh man, it just denies other people and grants you a upside This is like the worst piece of stacks I've ever seen. And maybe this is just because I'm new. Honestly, I'll probably find something I hate even more lower on the list, but what a man. This is another, if I understand, by the way. I believe this card was printed in a commander set. So Hull Breacher was actually another commander mistake card, which we have so many of at this point. I think Wizards of the Coast really just has to slam through. They have to get through their heads that please stop designing cards for commander. Like, just please. It never works out. Eminence, everyone hates it. It is some of your most popular commanders and some of the strongest commanders. But, you know, there's weaker Eminence commanders too, but they're still really good. Yeah, yucky. Just stop designing for commander, just design for standard, and let us use the mismatched card and, make something somewhat cohesive. Hull Breacher, we decided, yuck. Iona, Shield of Emeria. Flying. As Iona, Shield of Emeria enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. Yuck. That is, I think, one of the worst cards I've seen today. So, if you don't know this about me, I'm a big fan of monocolor decks because they're cheap. That's mostly the one reason. But it also allows you to get a greater respect for the color because it allows you to understand what the color's good at, what its strengths are. Like green doesn't have very good creature removal, but upside is that green is also very board-centric as a color, and usually your creature removal is just swinging big creatures at people. But I don't like Iona, Shield of Emeria, this card that I just looked at. I know she's 9 mana, but the fact that she can literally shut down people, she can just choose, you're playing against Luge, you're playing against Urza, High Lord Artificer, which it wouldn't work as well against him, but point being that you're playing against Finn, the Death Touch guy, Vorinclex. You play this, you say green, you say blue, you say red, they're done. Their game's over. And that's awful. That is just awful design. I can see this working in standard where most games end before you have 9 mana, but this is clearly, and I'd like to say it's fine. This is like, I get it. I don't want to discourage them from doing cool things like this, but at the same time, yeah, this just wasn't meant for Commander, clearly. And even, I imagine if you ever had this somehow pulled on you in Standard, you would still be a little mad, especially if you're only running dual color, which they mention here, it looks like. If your opponent's playing 1 or 2 color decks, it basically shuts them down. Yeah, so, yucky. Not a cool card. Jeweled Lotus, we talked about. I'm fine with the bans. And, yeah, it's just super powerful. Making the Jeweled Lotus, but you can only spend it to cast your commander is not a big enough downside. I would say, so, here's an interesting conversation we can have. What is the biggest downside that they could give to one of these cards, one of these Lotuses, and that would make it more balanced? Like, would it be, I'm trying to think, what would I say would be somewhat balanced? Maybe it has to be, you get 3 colorless, and you can spend that on any activated ability? But maybe that's just the new player in me, because I don't use many activated abilities. It's entirely possible that would be abusable. Moral of the story, just stop printing stuff with adding 3 colored mana. Don't do any Jeweled Lotus effects. I know you only get it once, but being able to get out a commander that's 4 mana on turn 1 is kind of ridiculous. Or using it to get your Corvold out on, like, turn 3. Still insane. So, Caracas. Add white or return target legendary creature to its owner's hand. Yeah, this is awful. So, I wasn't even thinking about this. I was just quickly reading what they said on the side here, and they said you can use it to make your, basically save your commander from removal. I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking you just cast it on other people's commanders and just ruin their gameplay. But, man, what a brutal card. I'm super glad this is out of the game. Why wouldn't you run this? I think this is a land that is so good, I would run it in, any color deck. It doesn't matter about the white mana. Being able to return people's commanders every turn. I know you only get to return one of them, but you can tap a land whenever you want. You can wait until, Corval comes out. Big burly Corval walks out, costs 8 mana, and you just tap and are like, alright, back to your hand. You just ruin their entire game, especially if they don't have fast mana. Wow, well, man, they did a great job with the ban list. I don't know what people are complaining about. All these cards seem awful to play against. But yeah, Leovold, Emissary of Trest. Each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. Whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. I hate the whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability. I think we've seen a card like that, and I don't want to go to him early, but target of a spell or ability whenever this creature, and it gives it all to all your creatures, so he does the same thing as Leovold. It's a little different because Nadu reveals that Nadu's honestly probably better in most cases. But yeah, Leovold, kind of like a worse Nadu in a way. He also has this, though. Each player can't draw more than one card. He is definitely the card I would be more annoyed to see than Nadu, but Nadu is just so unfun, too. It's hard to compare. It's like, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, and I heard somebody say, like, it's at a certain point, it's like how you want to get screwed over. And, Leovold and Nadu are both going to screw you over. If someone says, I'm going to play one of these two, it's hard to decide which you're going to play against. But yuck. Both options are yucky. Library of Alexandria. Tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool or draw a card from your library. You may use the card drawing ability only if you have exactly 7 cards in your hand. Okay, this is... Library was for a long time considered the 10th piece of power in vintage play. Like those, it was banned to avoid the perceived barrier to entry, but was strong enough for a candidate for banning, even without the optics, especially in long games where the card where the card draw yields inevitably over time, combined with its colorless nature, allowing it to go in every deck, and occasional difficulty for inexperienced players to realize that Library is the reason they're losing its place on the ban list is very secure. So this might just be me, but I see the power of Library of Alexandria. I get it, but I feel like it's hard to maintain 7 cards in hand. You're like playing only 1 card a turn since like turn 1, I feel like, in that case. So outside, I've never played against the Library of Alexandria. So outsider's perspective, this seems good because being able to draw a card with a land seems incredibly powerful, but this doesn't seem like the Caracas land where it gives me like immediate negative emotions, and I think that might just be exactly what they said. Inexperienced players don't realize that the library is the reason they're losing, so I'm sure if I played against it I would get smoked. But yeah, it doesn't give off immediate negative vibes, but probably good that it's banned. I'm not gonna doubt the choices made here. Limited resources. When limited resources comes into play, each player chooses 5 lands he or she controls and sacrifices the rest. As long as there's 10 or more lands in play, players cannot play lands. So, So this does seem... I think I heard about this one because the way I heard people talking about it is basically you're playing green-white, for example. You ramp up to 7 lands, and then you play limited resources. Everyone else has 3 lands. So you discard down to 5, and your opponents are stuck at 3 lands. And since there are 10 or more lands in play, you're stuck at 3 lands. And let's say they do it on turn 5 instead, the first time they can get the max value out of it. And you're at 1 land somehow, or you're at, 2 lands, and now you're stuck at 2 lands, and you can't play any more lands because it's, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Who's going to win in that match? Where one person has 5 mana a turn and everyone else has 2. Probably the 5 mana guy. Yeah, crazy card. Lutri the Spell Chaser. Companion. Each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name. This is an example of people already said companions were kind of botched. And I kind of agree. I think they're yucky. Especially before now there was, later on, I think this might have even been before companions were released, where they were like, alright, companions, when you can just play them from the companion zone, are just too powerful. So, I think you have to pay 3 to get the companion added to your hand, but when it was originally announced or whatever, when this first came out, the idea was going to be that you could just grab it whenever you wanted, pay the 3 mana, the 1 in the, the Izzet colors, and then you can counter a spell. Or, sorry, copy the spell that you're casting. Still really good. Yeah, and, for example, you can... Oh, it says you control, so you can't copy someone else's counter spell. I was going to say that would be kind of cool. But yeah, Lutri, awful. I understand why he's banned. Especially because his companion cost is just playing commander. That's how almost every commander deck works. There are a couple. I believe there's like a Dragonfire one. There's Rats. There's Knights that have you can run as many of these in your commander deck. I don't know them all, but there's quite a few actually. It's kind of cool. But yeah, Lutri, I don't like Lutri. I don't like companions. I don't like companions, I don't like partners, I don't like... just one card in the command zone, one card that is like your flagship, I kind of get. Backgrounds are kind of cool. I guess partners aren't the worst either, but companions are just going over the line. That's too much. You can have a companion and a partner. It's just yuck. Mana Crypt, as I've said, I've already talked about this. I think this is very much going to... I think this is very much improved casual play all around, because now people who are playing a Mana Crypt in their deck that they've been saying is a 7 now have to ask, hey, can I play this deck? It has a Mana Crypt, and then you say, I thought you said it was a 7, and they say, oh yeah, it also has Jeweled Lotus, and you go, that's not a 7, and then, you can argue about that, but it's fun. I'm happy that they're banned in casual play until they're rule zeroed back in. And I'm perfectly fine with people rule zeroing Mana Crypt and all of that back in. Doesn't bother me. But, yeah. That's it. Alright, Mox Emerald. This is a Power 9 kind of thing, right? Are these Power 9? I don't remember, but I believe... The Moxen were iconic and expensive cards at the time they were banned, and removing them from the card pool was intended to combat the notion. Yeah, so this is the same as... Oh, yeah, this is the exact same as previously, except I will admit, I think this is kind of strong. Like, it could probably stay in the format, but 0 for 1 mana, and it's not like a... I don't know, I guess it's not that crazy, but it's kind of good that Mana Crypt is banned. I guess it makes sense. These cards all would have made sense in a meta where Mana Crypt was legal. But now that Mana Crypt's banned, it just makes sense that all the Moxes are banned too. Which, yeah, these all are just... Every Mox in the color spectrum, they all tap for one of the colors. They're all banned. We looked at Nadu. I've shared my opinions on Nadu. I have a video somewhere. I think I actually have a 3 video saga talking about my opinions on the September 2024 bannings. It started with me just going over the bans for myself, then I reacted to Wubby's video going over the bans, then I talked one last time about the kind of fallout and and just some final thoughts on it, and where Wizards taking over, I believe. But yeah, enough said about that. Panoptic Mirror. Alright, Panoptic Mirrors... Oh, sorry. I started reading their thoughts on it. Let's read what it does. Imprint X. Tap, you may remove an instance or sorcery with converted mana cost X in your hand from the game. This card is imprinted. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may copy an imprinted instant or sorcery card and play the copy without paying its mana cost. So this seems really powerful. I know people have been kind of down on it, but the idea that you play an extra turn spell with this is just horrifying. And maybe on the lower end, you play a counter spell, because, like, you know, a counter spell doesn't matter. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may copy an imprinted instant to play it for free. Like, you know, who cares if it's a counter spell? Who cares if it's a board wipe? Actually, a board wipe would be incredibly annoying, but still, I think I can see this just being, miserable. And I think this kind of sums it up best, what they said here. Beyond the obvious extra turns combo, it's a trap for casual deck builders because it seems like a fun value engine. However, too many different 4+ mana spells when imprinted will grind the game to the halt. Wrath Tutor's discard even card draw can yield insurmountable advantage and lock up the game. Yeah, it just seems like there's too much good stuff that you can cast with this card that'll just... It can ruin games. Put Farewell on this, imagine. How fun is that? The board is... the entire board is wiped every time it hits your turn. How fun. Yeah, I'm glad that's gone. That just... yucky. Paradox Engine... Shit, I'm doing it again, sorry. Language. Paradox Engine 5. Whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control. A spell, that's everything in the game except for, like, lands, right? Yeah, that seems crazy, and you can combine that with artifacts, and suddenly you're just generating super insane amounts of mana. This would go great in, like, an Urza High Lord Artificer deck. And, you know, frankly, there's artifacts that draw cards. You can have those on tap. Yeah, this is insane. Yeah, this is just a weakened artifact decks, I feel like. I don't know where... I mean, and by the way, it's not only for artifact decks, but I'm just thinking of that because artifact decks usually run a lot of mana rocks because, you know, they're an artifact deck. This is insane in any deck, though. I understand the ban. They don't even need to explain it to me. Primeval Titan. Whenever Primeval Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for 2 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So, it's a 6-cost permanent, 6/6, and trample. And a giant, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so I see the problem here. Oh, and by the way, I didn't note this. It says any 2 land cards, not any basic lands or anything. This is kind of ridiculous. You can start by playing a Field of the Dead, you can play a whatever, and this is, I know I mentioned it when we were talking about Dockside, beware the OP enter the battlefield effect. Is it as strong as Dockside in a good game? No, but in a weaker... maybe not a weaker game, in a less, no, that's pretty much what I mean. In a lower power level game, this would be insane. And it's when it attacks, which is kind of crazy. I guess that's for the assumption that you're not going to be blinking it over and over to get 8 lands in 1 turn in green, which is, yeah. I don't know. It just seems like you're going to be doing annoying stuff with it. I don't like it. However, compared to some of the stuff on the list, I see why people are like, this might be able to pass. You know, it's a lot of mana, but again, you're in green, so realistically, you're going to be casting this like turn 6, turn 3. And then you're just gonna bulldoze everyone by just out-ramping them and, maybe doing some blinking shenanigans if you're green-white. But, I'm just theory crafting. I wasn't around when these cards were banned. Actually, it's been like a decade since it was banned. That's kind of crazy. But yeah, let's keep going. What have we got? Prophet of Krufix. Oh, I know this one. This one's miserable. Untap all creatures and lands you control during each other player's untap step. You may cast creature cards as though they had flash. This is way too powerful of a card, even for 5 mana with its awful stats. The effect you get out of this is just ridiculous. Incredible control. And I am so happy I never had to play against Prophet of Krufix. Although, I'm also so sad that I never got to play it. And I might have to play some, no-ban commander at some point, because Prophet of Krufix is the, dream card I want to play. It does everything, it's Seedborn Muse, plus you cast creature cards as though they had flash. It's insane. It's so good. I love that card. Obviously, it's good that it's banned, but that is an insane card. Recurring Nightmare. Sacrifice a creature. Return Recurring Nightmare to its owner's hand. Put target creature card from your graveyard into... Whoa. Wait. Okay. So you sacrifice a creature. Oh. Okay. Sacrifice a creature. It goes to its owner's hand. And then you get to put any creature card from your graveyard into play. I saw what they said here. Because returning Nightmare to its owner's hand is part of the casting cost, there's no chance to interact with Recurring Nightmare unless you get it on the way down, I guess. And, unless you counterspell it as it's, what's it called? Leaving the... what am I thinking? Unless you counterspell it before it hits the battlefield, it's a nightmare to deal with. And it's kind of sad when that's the only way to deal with it. I talked about it with Coalition Victory. If the only way to deal with it is to counterspell it, then it's bad. It's a bad card for the game, especially Commander, where it's more casual. Rofalos, Llanowar Emissary. Add, 2 cost, 2/1, add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each forest you control. Okay, so he's a Gaia's Cradle on an elf. Huh. Yeah, okay. Yeah, he's kind of ridiculous. I guess he's also... wait, no. Because Gaia's Cradle is for each creature you control, right? So Rofalos is for each forest you control, and you're playing a forest each turn anyways. Yeah, he's just super good ramp. I get it. Again, that kind of falls into the fast mana thing. I get it. Shahrazad has been banned since, Shahrazad has been banned since the beginning, I think. Yeah, this is just a goofy card, but I kind of like it. It appeals to me, but... yeah, it's annoying. It's convoluted. That one, I don't even think I need to explain myself. Sundering Titan. Oh no, another OP enters and leaves the battlefield effect. Choose a land of each basic land type and then destroy those lands. So if you phased it out, and you enter it, you blink it, it phases out, comes back, so you get to destroy 3 lands of each basic land type. That is so insane. That card, yep, get rid of it. It's very clear that is yucky. Even in a casual table, I think this would be classified as mass land destruction, and most people wouldn't be okay with it. So, yep, just even, worst case scenario, just get rid of it. Sway of the Stars. 10 mana, 8 and 2 blue. Each player shuffles his or her hand, graveyard, and permanents he or she owns into his or her library, then draws 7 cards. I just hate the lowering your life total stuff. This is very similar to Worldfire, where it destroys everything on the table. All permanents, lands. Yeah, all permanents. And then sets everyone's health to 1. This is just not that much better, and changes the game to basically be whoever moves right after the person who went first wins because they have a minion first. It's annoying. Yep, might as well shuffle up and play. Well put, Rules Committee. Sylvan Primordial. Alright, another very strong enters the battlefield effect. Let's read what it is, though. 7 mana. Reach. When Sylvan Primordial enters the battlefield for each opponent, destroy target non-creature permanent that player controls. For each opponent. For each permanent destroyed this way, search your library for a forest. So it's... Wow. So it's like... Wow. Yuck. Non-creature permanent, so that includes lands. Yeah. Wow. So, it's like Sundering Titan, but while you destroy their ramp, you get ramp too. Yeah, this is awful. Yeah, I'm happy that I'm not in a game with this in it. It's cool that it has reach, though. I love seeing reach on cards because there's so few cards with reach at this point. Although it's sad that it's an avatar and not like a tree folk, because I feel like tree folk don't get enough love. I only say that because my friend has a tree folk deck and it's just really bad. Alright. Time Vault. Tap to gain an additional turn after the current one. Time Vault doesn't untap normally during your untap phase. To untap it, you must skip a turn. Yeah, that just seems ridiculous. Huh. To untap it, so can you... Oh, so yeah, simple untap it. So if you untap it with another card, then it skips that untap skill. So if you were using Derevi, for example, you could just untap your artifact, and then you can get another turn after the current one, and all it requires is you playing a single creature. Wow, that is... Yeah, I get it. I hate extra turns already. Oh, and this is just an incredibly cheap extra turn. In addition to being Power 9. They say it was originally banned for poor optics, but this is the one that I could see, like, 2 mana to take an extra turn. Come on. Come on. We can admit that this one's powerful. Teleri, let's do Tinker first. Because I think they mentioned Tinker. Oh, sorry. They mentioned Tinker earlier. I think? No, they didn't. At the time you play Tinker, sacrifice an artifact, and it costs 3. Search your library for an artifact card and put that artifact into play. Shuffle. So, you have to sack an artifact, and you get a new artifact card. So... Oh, but I guess it can be any artifact. Yeah, that's annoying. That's one of those they didn't think about it cards, because there were, like, really powerful artifacts early in the game, too. So I don't even know how this one got out of Oh. Printed in 1999, February. Yeah, they didn't test it. That's back when they didn't test things. Okay, I see why it got printed. Alright, never mind. Yeah, I get it. Ban it. It's too powerful. We all know. Tolarian Academy. Add blue to your mana pool for each artifact you control. Don't even need to explain that one to me. Artifact decks go crazy. Yeah, they don't need any help. Trade secrets. 1 and 2 blue. Target opponent draws 2 cards, then you draw up to 4. That opponent may repeat this process as many times as he or she chooses. I heard their reasoning for this one, which is that 2 players can just be like, you trade it with your buddy at the table. You're the squid here, and you're like, hey man, you're looking down on cards. Wanna draw until we each have 50 cards in hand? And they can just be like, sure, yeah. And suddenly you're both in a winning position. It just leaves out the other 2 players. It's sad, but, that's how it is, I guess. It's a bad card, just design-wise. I get it. But usually I feel like you want it to be a downside and give it to the... I don't know. It's just... there's no way that works. In as many times as he or she chooses, it doesn't work in Commander. Upheaval. Return all permanents to their owner's hands. So yeah, this is another reset the game, it seems like. Return all permanents to their owner's hands. Is there any way... Huh. Oh. Wow, I didn't think about this, but look what they said here. You bounce everything, or you float all of your mana, bounce everything, and then replay your hand. Wow, that's yucky. Okay, so another incredibly strong card. We only have one more to go. We're almost to the end, and it's been over an hour. Jeez, man. Alright, let's see what it is. Okay. Yawgmoth's Bargain. Skip your draw step, pay 1 life, draw a card. That is ridiculous. They actually have a card very similar to this. And it is ran in pretty much every CEDH deck. I don't know if it's Necropotence, but it's something with it's a similar black card. And its thing is that, like, you skip your draw step, but you choose... It's like before you don't get to look at your deck, and you just choose how many cards you're going to draw at the beginning, and you lose that much life. So this was just a more versatile version of it. Of course, it costs 6 mana, but yeah, it's just, you know, it's Commander, paying 1 life to draw a card is too powerful. It's actually a very similar effect to Grizzlebrand, who is also banned, pay 7 life, draw 7. You're just doing it slower, which I think does have advantages, and I would argue is stronger than Grizzlebrand's effect. Like, if we're just looking at... Also, I just noticed Grizzlebrand's 8 mana. I thought he was 7. But, yeah, I would say Yawgmoth's Bargain is stronger than Grizzlebrand. Like, for card draw. But Grizzlebrand is probably, like, easier to cheat out by, like, throwing in your graveyard and then just sacking. But, yeah, I'm super happy that I got to go over the Commander ban list. My final thoughts on the matter, I think everyone was giving the rules committee a lot, like, way too much heat. Because those bans, honestly, don't seem that bad. Like, they all seem, like, really reasonable. And, like, it just feels like, here's genuine opinion. Honest... I want to be completely, you know, mask off. Here we go. It feels like people, like, have these cards that, back when they played on the schoolyards, these were insane cards. And I agree, there are some really cool cards in here. Like, Prophet of Krufix, I would have loved to be able to play with. And if I played with Prophet of Krufix, I'm sure that for every day after Prophet of Krufix was banned, I would have been mad. Because that card is so cool, so strong, and, you know, it would have reminded me of better times, of the times when I was enjoying Magic the most, and I was the most into Magic, but I don't know. You know, times change, and you shouldn't be so attached to the cardboard that, you know, you're gonna have a mental breakdown if a card gets banned. It's really important that and this goes for everything. I know in my video about the not really the leaked commander power level list or commander bracket list, but in the information that the one guy gathered, you know, if Corvald, if Ur-Dragon, if Edgar, if there were a couple more that were there too, but I can't remember their names. If they all got not only tier forward, but banned, people would be furious, but I could completely understand it. Oh man, it's hard to say. But what I'm trying to say is I think the rules committee did a really good job. So I think that it's a little sad that they went out the way they did, not because they did a bad job with the last bannings, but it's just really sad how the community, you know, how the community treated them when they did what I would consider just a fantastic job at balancing the unbalanceable card game, which is supposed to be, you know, what's the word for it? Like, permanent? It's, yeah. But either way, thanks for watching. This was incredibly long, and honestly, it was mostly just me being like, yeah, I agree with that, because these cards are all absurd, and if you don't have any attachment to them from prior, this is all just, good news to see them all banned. So, I'll see y'all next time. Bye.